Welcome back here with Goldberg. Today I'm going to be dealing with a request I received, and it goes as follows. Dear Dr. Goldberg, what is your view on the phenomenon of headhunters, recruiters, or hiring managers employing the argument, it's a great opportunity, brah, or better yet, this is the opportunity of a lifetime? Yes. I think anyone who's meandered through the fields of the American job market has probably come across this phraseology at some point. It's never good. It basically indicates the fact that even though they are going to try to work you like a dog oftentimes, you got to be loyal to the company, you got to be passionate about it. How am I supposed to be passionate about working at Xerox or, Sherwin-Williams? Yeah, maybe I'm narrow-minded. But while they demand all of that stuff, it will be for low wages, low benefits, and just in general, you're not going to be treated that well. You'll have limited opportunities to move up in the corporate sphere. I think back to when I was in the process of maybe joining the military. I was going through all that, getting ready for MEPS. I picked up some extra hours, or I was planning to, so I applied at Advanced Auto Parts. I go in, the manager, he used to run like a pizza place. He was a nice guy, very outgoing, and he's like, you gotta love being here. We're a family. We do stuff together. It's a great opportunity. And then he gives me the pay, and it's like $9 an hour to be a sales associate / driver, which sadly enough at the time was actually a pay cut. So this is some years ago. So I didn't take the job, but I've even seen similar stuff with like the professional sphere. And they used to make the argument, you need experience. Well, I happen to have the experience. I have a degree. I have the certs. They just say you need more experience. And that's their justification for lowballing you. And they'll say, yeah, but it's a great opportunity. And I'm like, well, if it's a great opportunity, if it's the opportunity of a lifetime, why aren't you paying like it's the opportunity of a lifetime? Simple, because it's a bunch of BS. And it's not the fault of the recruiters. It's really the companies themselves, which is what we're going to get into in just a second. Now, of course, we'll have the obligatory libertarians and conservatives roll in. Oh, I guess you're just jealous of people who are more successful. Projection. No, you see, we on this channel, we don't take Freud very seriously. I know that especially social conservatives who probably never read Freud, they're experts on this sort of thing. But you should actually investigate what he stood for, his real ideas. Just because there are real problems with an economic structure does not mean you need to incessantly dismiss it because it doesn't fit your political viewpoint. I don't care what Fox News, the Republican Party says. I don't care what Cato Institute says. Uninterested, frankly, okay? We need to be realistic about what's going on because if we're going to have a country in the future, the economy is at the heart of it, without question. There's a great book by Markovits. It's on meritocracy, and I'll link to it. It's a little bit long and redundant, but if you read even 50%, you'll get a lot of good information. He theorizes that, back in the day, you had the kind of landed aristocracy, the people who just had tenant farmers on their estates, a la Downton Abbey. They didn't work much. They did their parties and festivals, competitions. But that changes. So in the 1900s, prior to the 1940s, they said Yale would admit like 90% of students, even if you didn't have good grades. If you had the connections, you were legacy, or if you could pay, you would get to go to Yale. And you didn't even have high standards at those schools. Then in the 50s, the meritocracy and individualism comes on the block. And they start trying to raise the stakes so that we can get rid of this old class that's just there because of the house they were born into. And the folks come in, and now Yale is like less than 8% admitted. So it's very difficult to get in, all that sort of jazz, right? Well, what has it done? Okay, so people work really hard to get into the school. They graduate, and they send their kids to elite schools, which sometimes you have to get it now preschools. You have to have admissions, applications, and whatnot. And they marry into the same class. Even though divorce rate is pretty high for working middle-class Americans, it's much lower for these wealthy people. So they keep the money together, kind of like the old, upper-class people would do. They work long hours for it, indeed, if you're like an investment banker or you're a lawyer, but the wealth gap is extreme. Back in the day, a CEO would probably live in a middle-class neighborhood. They had a good salary, but it wasn't exorbitant. You're starting to see that even widening more. And you're like, well, yeah, but what's the matter? I mean, they're just working hard. And Americanism, that's what we want. People who love freedom and work hard. The effects, of course, are a little bit more complicated. What happens is they go to the good schools, and maybe they come out of like Yale, and they go work for McCuxey Consulting, or what was the one that Romney ran? It was like Bay Capital or Booty Capital. And they come up to these corporations who traditionally the corporations were worker-centric, right? They said, okay, you come and work for us. As long as you do a good job, we're going to give you a lot of training. We want you to stay with us. Companies in the 50s and 60s would put tons of money into training because it was a sense of relationship. Like they talk about family nowadays, but they don't really mean it. You could start as a line cook at McDonald's. A guy worked his way up to be CEO. Very rare nowadays. Because what these consultants do, they come in and they're like, oh, you don't sound like you're fast enough. You need to be more efficient. And efficiency translates into let's maximize quarterly profit margins by cutting benefits, cutting pensions, and also cutting middle management. This is the big war on the middle class you don't hear about. They eliminate middle management by claiming it's bloated. Then you have a lower class that is underpaid but overworked. And of course, the libertarians are going to say, you're only worth that amount of money. Okay, yeah, we're back to the real life. So you can go to some sectors where you work doing backbreaking labor, and you get paid very little. You can sit in an office doing nothing, and you can make a lot more. And you're going to say it's mentally more demanding. Not necessarily. There are construction jobs that are very, you have to use your brain quite a great deal, and they might pay less than being in an office. This is based upon where you're working. It can be based upon class attitudes. You wear a suit, you should be paid more, all that BS. But the point is, by getting rid of the middle management, there's less opportunities for average people to move up. And of course, you have that chasm of knowledge between the upper class folks and the working or middle class who have a more difficult time rising up. Getting into a good school is becoming something that can be like start in kindergarten, middle school. It's usually something that parents manage. If you don't have that knowledge or skill set in the working class, the chances of you achieving such a high position is very low. Because CEOs are now being hired outside of the company, there's even less opportunities to get into the executive realm, even if you work there a long time. And if you work there too long and make too much money, they might try to fire you because you're too expensive. So you've got a lot of folks who are capped salary-wise. They can't really move up. They can at best make lateral movements and try to go to another company. These CEO salaries that are so high is largely because, again, you get rid of the middle managers and you hire these people based upon how well they're making the stock perform. That's why they make this exorbitant wage when you're saying, what are you really doing that justifies it? Well, of course, if you don't have a bunch of managers below you that have to be compensated, it's easier to justify that from a financial standpoint. The other thing they do is they, of course, control the political system. So Trump has been a mixed bag, but he's certainly not stood up to corporations. He cucked out on the DHS thing with the students who could go home and do online classes. You can always see when he takes a strong position, then he backs off because probably the corporate donors squealed at him on the phone enough. At any rate, Biden is a big, he's in the pockets of the credit card and bank companies along with his son. Kamala Harris, big tech. Kamala is an example of meritocracy. The only reason why a Howard University graduate is on the Democratic ticket is because she has some skills that other people don't have. Kind of like men. I think she applied those skills. But, give her credit. If you can do that with Willie Brown, you're a hero if you're willing to do that. I was just thinking Willie Brown could probably be like a PUA. I think he'd be pretty convincing, although I think he's actually gotten women, so he'd be a step above most of the ones on the internet.com. Bernie Booty Boy. People said he was anti-establishment, but it's curious how he didn't actually support strong borders. You know why that is? Because Bernie is not really anti-corporations. You see, you can't tell me you're pro-working class and then you want a bunch of cheap labor flooding the country. That hurts the wages of working and middle-class people. These visa programs are decimating the middle class. Bernie is not really anti-corporation. He's more so than others, but he's not as strong as people believe. And of course, he endorsed Hillary and he endorsed Biden. What does that tell you? Flimsy Andrew was another one. People said he was anti-establishment. I mean, the guy literally is saying to poor white and black Americans, here, I'm going to give you $1,000 a month because your job is going to be taken by a robot. Meanwhile, I want a massive expansion of visas, high-tech visas or whatever from India and China. In other words, you be content with your little welfare while we continue rising up and making more money. That is what the general meritocratic idea is. And that's regardless of race, by the way. It's the idea that, okay, anyone can come. Well, that destroys the entire concept of a nation, because then you're saying, well, if this person works harder, why shouldn't you take them? Well, maybe because you are a nation, and a nation is made up of more than simply a stock market. But what the conservatives and the leftists have done is they've distilled it all to where the economy is all that matters. Money is all that matters. And so if you are not in that upper elite and you don't have the means to get there, well, shut up and enjoy your position. That's the message in general. For this reason, I'm kind of wondering if you're not going to see more outright. We've seen it on the left to a certain extent, but I'm curious if you're not going to see the right start moving more in the direction of embracing certain socialist ideas. Not to say that socialism always works well, but it's one of those dynamics where, unfortunately, when you look at the situation that we're in, you cannot expect politicians bankrolled by big corporate interests to go against big corporate interests. That's why Trump's agenda never got past the Senate. This is why you can expect whatever Biden does, if he gets in on healthcare, will be watered down immensely like it was under Obama. And you look across the world in Belarus, I think the reason Lukashenko has not fallen from power is because a lot of Belarus is apparently still under state control of the economy, just like in Venezuela. Maduro is still there. It's much harder to kick someone out when, the entire industry is not privately held, because the private sector will go against anyone who is opposed to them very quickly. There have been presidents in South America who have been impeached because they were anti-corporate too much. So, you just see how things play out. This is not endorsing Lukashenko. I don't know if he's actually a good leader, but it just shows you the difference. And so if you really want to maintain the concept of a nation, can you do that with this kind of deregulation, pro-business attitude the Republicans have? I'm not entirely certain. Maybe to a limited degree, but if you're not willing to embrace a certain level of nationalization, or if you don't want to go there, at least say, look, you're going to obey this law or we're going to put you in prison, how else are you going to get corporations to work with you? I don't really know. But it just goes to show, if you are in the job market, you have to pay attention, because these terms are a great way for people to just try to, essentially make you get down on your knees to them. Oh, you should be grateful we're giving you a position. No, we need to stop treating people, especially Americans, like they're essentially scum in an economic water wheel, and start saying, okay, the corporations need to change their behavior, not just the people constantly scampering after any little way to make money to prove that, at least you worked hard enough. I just don't agree with that general concept. I think it's largely a political, it's just a distraction, okay? Corporations are behaving badly. We need to stop blaming people and start looking at what they're doing and what the upper class is getting away with.